welcome to our pitch session for our life sciences track for Invest Precision Medicine Pitch Perfect. I'm Stephanie Baum, Director of Special Projects for MedCity News. And before we get started with our pitch track this afternoon, I'd like to give you some background on MedCity News. We were founded in late 2008 to cover innovation in life sciences and healthcare. We have over 425,000 unique visitors each month. We cover biopharma, digital health, medical devices, diagnostics, as well as hospitals and payers in the context of the industry's overall transformation. In addition to Invest Precision Medicine, we host a number of conferences focusing on investment, population health, digital health, and patient engagement. We accept outside content through our MedCity Influencers program. We also have a program geared for startups, a membership-based program called MedCitizens, which comes with editorial and event benefits. And pretty recent to MedCity News, we've unveiled a program called Spotlight. It uses video to tell the story of important companies, executives, and healthcare initiatives. Our inaugural Spotlight focuses on cancer IQ and is available on our website. If you have any questions about MedCitizens or other programs we offer, you can contact me at sbaum@medcitynews.com. Additionally, we have a podcast series called MedCity Pivot. You can listen to all our episodes on our website. If you have questions about our podcast, want to take part in it, you can contact our editor-in-chief, Arundhati Parmar, at aparmar@medcitynews.com. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Independence Blue Cross, which is the largest health insurance organization in Southeast Pennsylvania, as well as JPOD at University of Pennsylvania, which is part of J&J Innovation. I'd like to thank our partners, University City Science Center, Mid-America Healthcare Investors Network, Health Wildcatters, and Startup Health, as well as Argo Pond Consulting. So before we get started, let's just go over some ground rules for this contest. Each startup has 10 minutes. And that will be divvied up between 4 minutes to present an overview of their company and 6 minutes of Q&A with the judges. The time will be strictly enforced, and we've introduced a method to just give our speakers a notice that their time is up. You'll hear an alarm, a gentle alarm, the dulcet tones coming from my phone, and then they'll have to wrap up. At the end of the presentations, we'll provide an online poll to determine the audience's favorite. And the winner of this track will be announced on Monday, along with the winner of the Health IT track on medcitynews.com. So now I'd like to introduce our judges. We have Wayne Barz, the Chief Investment Officer with Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Northeast Pennsylvania. He has overall responsibility for an active portfolio of 180 companies and the team of 6 that work directly with him. Over his 20 years with the organization, he helped clients raise $175 million in outside capital, helped more than 140 companies get started at tech ventures, and served as board advisor observer for a dozen companies. He spent 13 years prior to coming to Ben Franklin Technology Partners for Northeastern Pennsylvania with a private consulting firm and the Allentown Economic Development Corps, where in 1987, he helped develop the Bridgeworks Enterprise Center Incubator. Outside of Ben Franklin, he currently serves as board president for the nonprofit Community Action Committee of the Lehigh Valley. Although a proud economics and MBA degree holder from Lehigh University, he also served as an adjunct Lafayette College professor. We also have Rena Rosenberg, partner with Robin Hood Ventures. Rena is a consultant focused in the healthcare, pharmaceutical, and biotech sectors. She was at McKinsey & Company for 14 years with broad experience across the entire healthcare system, innovative and generic pharmaceutical manufacturers, global public health organizations, insurance companies, and providers. Rena invests in early stage, high growth life sciences and technology companies, coaches entrepreneurs on product development and commercialization, and provides capital and facilities networking opportunities. She leads due diligence efforts and determines investment commitment for growing companies. She received her PhD from University of Chicago in economics and a BA in economics from Barnard College at Columbia University. And now we'll kick off this track with Stingray Therapeutics. Stingray Therapeutics is an immune oncology company leading the charge to bring the next generation of new immune oncology agents forward. Today, all Stingray Therapeutics oncology therapeutics are in only one arm of the immune system, adaptive immunity. But the immune system has two major arms that synergistically work together, adaptive and innate immunity. Stingray Therapeutics program in innate immunity inhibits the direct negative regulator of the major pathway, adding innate immunity into the fight against cancer, and has the promise of making immune oncology therapy dramatically more effective. And presenting for Stingray Therapeutics is Jonathan Northrup, CEO and co-founder. Take it away, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Can you all see my screen? It's my pleasure to introduce Stingray Therapeutics, targeting innate immunity and bringing forward the next generation of immune oncology agents. Our goal is to have both arms of the immune system in the fight to defeat cancer. Right now, innate immunity is not in the fight. We have two innovations in our company. First, a next generation oral cancer drug to enhance immune oncology treatment, SR8541A. And second, a business model which returns to investors in 3 years, not the idea to medicine cabinet 12 years pharmaceutical companies are known for. I'm an expert in this business with almost 30 years in pharma on the buy side, buying similar programs for Eli Lilly, and now 10 years in biotech, with this being my third successful company going forward. We're specialists in biotech, taking a new company every 4 years or so through this model. Now bringing you number 3. We can execute, we know the space, and we have a strong team. Dr. Sunil Sharma, my co-founder, has nurtured drugs from initial discovery through clinical trials and is a deep expert, having done over 150 clinical oncology trials. Our tech is based on these two premier scientists, Jim Allison, who founded Immune Oncology, and Zihan Chen, who discovered our target and has shown how important adding innate immunity to adaptive immunity is for cancer treatment. Let's look at the right side of the slide first. We have two major immune arms which enable our immune system to fight. All of our current immune oncology therapies work in adaptive immunity, the left arm. Innate immunity, the right arm, is missing. Innate immunity has several important functions to fight cancer. It's a first responder on the scene. It's a beacon and a locator for adaptive immunity to bring it to the fight. And it's an activator for key adaptive immunity fighters, T cells and natural killer cells, and turning them on so they fight. Fighting with just adaptive immunity is like fighting with one arm tied behind your back. We bring innate immunity to the fight by stopping ENPP1. You can see in the center on the left, the direct negative regulator of the pathway that produces interferon and the primary pathway of innate immunity. This is what cancers upregulate to block innate immunity. Here's our assay for immune activation. We grow a tumor in a sphere just as it grows in the body. We add white blood cells and immune system, which we stain orange so you can see it. On the right, DMSO is our control. Without our compounds, the white blood cells do not attack. But with our drug on board, the T cells and natural killer cells of the immune system attack. You can see them enter the tumor and work to kill it. After a week, the cancer is dead. Here's one example of our drug in a mouse model in combination with one dose of radiation. We essentially flatline the tumor and increase response another 65%. Our drug has broad potential across many cancers and in many combinations. And this is what Big Pharma wants to buy the program, broad activity. This is what we're doing every day right now and where we are in development. We will file our IND in April, permission to start clinical trials on patients. Like with any truly exciting program, there is competition. Stingray is neck and neck with AbbVie, who bought the Mavu Pharma program in July of last year. Purchase price was north of 300 million. This shows pharma is interested in the pathway, and we are way ahead. This is a straight average of recent exits in our space. The returns have been very lucrative. Consider investing in our bridge financing into our Series A or leading our Series A if you're an institutional investor. Our bridge financing is open now and will close soon. Join me in this great company, which is aiming to bring immune oncology therapy to the next level. Join a deeply experienced team repeating their business model for the third time. Thank you very much.
Okay, Wayne, would you like to start?
Sure. Great presentation. Obviously, great important science that you're working on there. I think probably you talked about getting to IND in April, and I know you only had about a 4-minute presentation there to run us through, a lifetime of work. But how do you really think you can get submitted for an IND in April? And then what is your path after that?
Thank you, Wayne. We do think so. We're right now in the middle of our toxicology, in the middle of our drug manufacturing, and we've actually looked at every day between now and actually April 12th, and we feel we can do this by April 12th. It does require the financing to continue, and we continue to raise money and to make progress on our convertible note, which is we've raised about $1.5 million and need another $500,000 to pay for everything that is required in the IND. The other $500,000 will go toward an early start of clinical trials. Once we get the IND filed, we plan to do 2 clinical trials. We will do one, as I like to say, for the FDA to get all their top designations and get to market in 3 to 4 years instead of the typical 8 or 9. And we will do one for big pharma, which will really want to see how the drug performs in a complex solid tumor in combination to determine that this is a drug that can be taken broadly through oncology as we say it can. Those 2 trials should set us up for a sale, and we believe that sale should happen in 2022 or 2023.
Very fast. I'll let Rena ask some questions. She's got the PhD in this area.
No, and I don't have a science PhD. I have an economics PhD, a lot less interesting and relevant. But in any event, yes, John, thank you so much for this really exciting therapy. I was going to ask, probably related to what Wayne was asking, as you showed, there's interest increasingly early from biopharma. The Mavu Pharma was picked up in preclinical. So have you had any discussion or interest with strategics? And if not, when do you expect sort of their interest to start being generated?
So we have had discussion with strategics and we have found interest. Of course, the extent of the interest varies, but the best interest we've had have been people that have said, we like the program a lot. We want to look at it as soon as you finish all of your in vivo mouse efficacy work, which is currently ongoing and should complete in January. And, but they said, and I found this particularly encouraging, but if you get in serious discussions with anyone else, please call us at that time, even if you don't have that work done. So that's the most positive conversations. And then there are people that don't see this as a strategic target, basically don't want to invest in immune oncology. So we get a full spectrum, but we do have several folks that are very interested. And because we can't know that we can sell it at any time, that's a decision that the buyer makes, not me, the seller. So at the same time, we continue to raise money and plan for Series A and plan to do phase 1 and phase 2 studies. And we do have 2 VCs in our diligence room right now looking to see if they would be that lead investor.
have you talked to other companies about adapting the platform outside of cancer at this point?
Well, we have not. It's a great question. I didn't have time to go into this, but because we stimulate innate immunity, the program also has some great applications in infectious diseases, and particularly in hepatitis B virus. Now, hepatitis B virus is primarily an Asian and African virus. It's important in China and Japan, but not that important in the West. So we're not that knowledgeable about it here, but unlike hepatitis C, where we have great treatments that typically can cure everybody, about 5% of the people that get hepatitis B become chronically infected, and antivirals do not work to clear the virus. They suppress it a little, but they don't clear the virus, and people have a very rough time with this disease. We believe by adding enhanced host immunity through our drug with a direct antiviral, we might very well be able to clear hepatitis B. Another important virus is tuberculosis and Mycobacterium avium. Both of these diseases actually produce a bacterial sourced like ENPP1 molecule called CDNP that they use to suppress our host immunity, and that's how they're able to live within the cells of our body. So we have dual inhibitors of ENPP1 and CDNP, very, very potent, that we think would be great for this disease.
It's a great way to generate revenue as well, non-dilutive cash for the business. So sorry, Rena.
Absolutely, thank you. We also are in Texas because Texas has great non-dilutive programs for oncology companies, and we will be applying for that grant this January.
You're muted, Rena.
Maybe a little bit, or I guess on the same topic though of other indications, I guess it may be a little bit early for COVID-19, but I guess because it's a stimulator of interferon genes, I thought there might be a relationship there, since I've read some of the literature that talks about why there's a difference in disease severity across different people. It implicates interferon. So I was just wondering about that as well.
You're absolutely correct, Rena. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't mention it because our time is so limited, but not in just getting the infection, but in the people that go into severe disease and have dramatic suppression of interferon and activation of cytokines. We do think our drug could have a role with a direct antiviral. And we are currently doing preclinical tests in COVID-19 mice in Sweden to see if in fact that holds up.
Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you for, thank you, John.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Okay, and next up we have Solution Medical. Solution is an early stage life science company based in Philadelphia, developing more patient-friendly drug delivery systems for reconstitutable drugs. They specifically aim to improve the administration of efficacy of life-saving injectable medications for their Twist-Ject auto injector for people living with adrenal insufficiency, including Addison's disease and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Julia Anthony, founder and CEO, will present, but just before she comes to the virtual stage, I'd just like to remind our attendees that after this, the presentations are done and the poll is taken, we invite you to stick around to network, and I'll turn it over to you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody, let me shut this. Can everybody see my screen and hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Anthony. I am actually the co-founder and CEO of Solution Medical, and I'm here speaking with you today because my brother and I have almost died multiple times throughout our lives. That's because we were born with a rare genetic adrenal insufficiency condition where our bodies do not produce enough cortisol. and this puts us at risk for what's called an adrenal crisis. Now, most of you watching today are likely familiar with what's called an EpiPen, which is used for anaphylaxis. And like people at risk for anaphylaxis, adrenal insufficiency sufferers must carry rescue medication with them at all times. However, we do not have the luxury of an EpiPen. This is because our life-saving medication requires 15 user steps and multiple minutes to mix and administer. There's a diluent or liquid portion of our medication, a lyophilized powder, and these need to be mixed immediately prior to administration. The nearly 1 million people at risk of an adrenal crisis in the United States and Europe, including my brother and myself, must worry that someone will be able to perform a veritable chemistry experiment to save our lives. Our combination drug delivery device optimizes ease of use and provides one-step medication mixing, which through our benchtop studies, we've proven mixes medication 20 times faster than the current standard of care. Unlike other solutions, our device also automatically removes air and can be activated in any orientation, which is especially important in an acute life-threatening situation. With our simpler, faster, and safer solution, we aim to improve user experience and increase adherence, improve outcomes and decrease healthcare burden, and most importantly, save lives. And it's important to note here that adrenal crisis, we believe, is an ideal market because we're solving a critical unmet need in a rare disease space, which gives us a lot of regulatory benefits. We've spoken with the FDA and believe that we qualify for orphan product designation. However, solving this critical unmet need is just the beginning. Worldwide healthcare is trending towards more at-home treatments, and pharma companies are seeking ways to deliver high-volume drugs for self-treatment in a timely manner. With our platform delivery system, we intend to expand into other markets, including in vitro fertilization therapies, monoclonal antibody treatments, as well as antipsychotic drugs. Our go-to-market strategy includes 2 revenue pathways. For our primary target of adrenal crisis, as well as some secondary targets, including IVF or in vitro fertilization, we will manufacture, sell, and distribute our fill devices through prescribers. We will do this by acquiring our API or active pharmaceutical ingredient through a generic supplier and use CMOs to manufacture and fill and finish our device. Throughout this process, we also plan to pursue licensing and joint development agreements with existing pharma companies in select spaces. And multiple pharma companies have already expressed interest in our device for the purposes of patent evergreening and using our device within pipeline drug delivery. So who's in this with me? I got my master's degree from Thomas Jefferson University in medical device design after getting a degree in kinesiology, and I am a patient. My co-founder, Jonathan Keel, has a PhD in chemical engineering. He's a successful startup founder and has worked in the CMO and the supply chain space before. We're also backed by Richard Ross. He's an internationally recognized pediatric endocrinologist, Dieter Weinen, the president and CEO of Bayer Pharma, as well as Dennis Boyle, one of the founding partners of IDEO, an international design firm based in California. We are also a part of J-Labs, I'm excited to share, and we recently obtained a few exciting grants. We'll be sharing some press releases about them, hopefully by the end of this year. Doing that. I'll leave you with one last thought. The time it has taken for this pitch is still less time than it takes most people to mix and prepare the rescue medication that my brother and I both need. My name is Julia Anthony, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Solution Medical. We are actively fundraising, and I invite you to join Solution and our growing cohort of partners. With your investment, we can save lives because together we are the solution. Thank you.
Okay, Rena, would you like to start?
Absolutely. So thank you, Julia. This is just an outstanding innovation. And I briefly watched the YouTube video version going through the steps of that chart. And I was like, my head was spinning. So I can't even imagine what it would be like to actually be in that position. I have 2 questions, but one is sort of a very short question. So the first question is, have you actually met up with the EpiPen team, the team who developed it and launched it and commercialized it. There were two groups because it was first owned by King Pharma and then got into the hands of Pfizer. But if not, I would encourage you to connect with them, and I'd be happy to help facilitate that because they have a lot of really important learnings. The second question is, I'm just wondering, you didn't mention, but I would imagine that patient advocacy groups will be incredibly helpful for you in this endeavor. And I was just wondering what you see their role as.
Yes, I knew we had a short amount of time, so I just wanted to get in under time, and then I actually have an appendix if I need it, and I'm allowed to share my screen again. We've actually partnered with 5 nonprofit groups here in the US with collaborative relationships, National Adrenal Diseases Foundation, the CARES Foundation, and a handful of others. And we're also in touch with nonprofit groups in Canada and Australia and the UK as well. They are pivotal to our success, and we really believe that this is going to be one of the primary channels we're able to get in touch with future customers. And actually, we have people reaching out to us pretty much every day from around the world, parents asking when this will be available for their kids, mostly through referrals with these groups. And we have not spoken directly with people on the EpiPen team. We have spoken with some people who helped with their regulatory, but we have Dennis Boyle actually helped create a reconstitution device for Eli Lilly. He's one of our advisors. And Dieter Weinen used to work for Pfizer, so he has a lot of inroads for us when we want to talk with them. They currently create the current standard of care, so we are in touch with them. And we're also in touch with AviQ, one of the biggest competitors to EpiPen.
Just incredible stuff, and I found myself with a lot of questions around the condition itself, but we won't bog this brief time down with that.
Okay.
So the device itself, you showed a device. How many have you produced? And talk a little bit about the cost versus the end market price.
Sure. So right now we're making all of them by hand. We have proof of concept. What you do is you twist the cap 180 degrees. That causes everything to mix inside in only one step, and then you're able to jab it into your leg like you would an EpiPen. We don't have a firm COGS yet, so one of the biggest the biggest piece of feedback we've gotten from VCs so far is they want to know we can manufacture this at scale. With the grants that we just received, we're actually doing a focused technical review on how we can aseptically fill and finish the device. Things are going in the right direction. It looks like it's going to be very possible with minimal changes. So we're in the process right now of determining what the COGS will be, and how exactly we're going to get the drug into the product. Does that answer your question? I know it's not super specific, but that's where we're at right now. So
it does, and and it leads into path to completion of all of that and the amount of money that you need to do that.
Yeah, I had a development slide, but rather than waste time, I'll just talk through it. So we should be to market, we think, by 2025, because the drug is well understood. So we're pursuing a 505(b)(2) regulatory pathway through the Office of Combination Products. We'll have to show bioequivalence with the current standard of care, but we don't need to do a full new drug application. So because of that and the fact that we think we'll get orphan product designation, that will waive the nearly $3 million filing fee and expedite the whole process, we believe we'll be to market by end of 2024, if not by 2025. And that actually lines up really well with this product, which is currently our only direct competitor. The drug's off patent, but the vial goes off patent in 2023 in Europe and 2025 in the US. So we're strategically lining ourselves up to come in as a new proprietary option, possibly partner with Pfizer, but also planning to do this entirely ourselves in case they choose to not pursue that with us. And we think we're preparing our pre-sub materials right now for the FDA to get full clarification on the BE study, but we believe it's going to take about $15 million to get this to market, soup to nuts. But again, if we have to do more than a BE study and go further out with proving things about the drug, it would be more expensive. So,
Thank you.
Are they actively marketing that product? Or is it just a kind of more of a tail product that they're not paying much attention to? It sells itself.
They did just revamp their line, actually, their supply chain line in Kalamazoo, Michigan, somewhat recent, like last 2 years. But from the people we've spoken with, they aren't, so far, they don't seem to be pursuing innovation in the space, just optimizing the volumes that they can produce. It actually sells quite significantly. The largest channel is hospitals, because it's used for other indications in the hospital. So our primary channel and focus is end users and patients outside of the hospital, but we are exploring actually with our JPAL and some of our other partners, how we can penetrate other channels and meet unmet needs for other customers.
Thank you, Julia. That's all the time we have for this particular pitch.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Biomeme. Biomeme started out by creating the first iPhone add-on capable of performing molecular diagnostics. Since their inception, they have used advanced biology and chemistry along with world-class hardware and software engineering to create elegant solutions to complex problems. Over the years, the team has grown, and along the way, Biomeme has built the leading mobile molecular diagnostics platform. Max Perelman, the co-founder, will present. Over to you, Max.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good to meet you all. Let me share my screen as well here. Biomeme, I launched Biomeme with my two co-founders about 8 years ago with the vision of empowering anyone, anywhere with the capabilities of central lab in the palm of their hand. It's 2020. We've all been experiencing COVID, and despite that, the gold standard in diagnostics is still lab bound. It's still unavailable to everyone, especially with the poor and uninsured communities. All of the equipment that's out there is generally dependent on electricity, ancillary lab equipment, advanced special training. And typically the molecular diagnostics that are available are complex, but open, or they're simple with a closed architecture. The Biomeme platform, however, includes a variety of elements. It has mobile sample prep that requires no special lab equipment. It's ultra portable. The hardware has an internal battery. It can run about 6 runs on a single charge. All of our consumables are lyophilized and shelf stable for 1 to 2 years. The software is very intuitive. Everything's operated via smartphone apps. And then when the smartphone controllers have a cellular Wi-Fi connection, all of the data is able to sync up to our cloud-based data management platform that's HIPAA compliant. We also have a REST API to enable folks to integrate with third-party databases such as LIMS, EHR, EMR systems as well. So our past, this is kind of up until COVID. We've been producing fast DNA and RNA extraction kits, small mobile real-time qPCR thermal cyclers that require no special experience to use. These are some photos of me last year when we could all still travel. I was in the Gobi Desert swabbing young Bactrian camels to test them for MERS, another coronavirus. And you can see kind of that central photo. This is really the lab situations that we've primarily been operating in. And on the right there is an example of some results from our, these are real-time PCR amplification plots. So progress to date, after being established about 8 years ago, we've received $10 million in investment. Most recently, we had a $5 million note that we closed on this past summer that's enabled us to make some very large raw materials and manufacturing purchases and really scale up to be able to play our part in fighting the COVID pandemic. Revenue to date has been about 50 million, and about half of that has been in 2020. We have over 200 staff, probably close to 230 full-time staff right now across 4 states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, New Mexico, and we also have a large location in Hollywood, California. We have 8 global patent families covering all of the key elements of our platform, the devices, the software, plastic consumables, and reagents. We also have quite a bit of IP that's just kept in-house as trade secrets around our manufacturing processes, some additional software and firmware elements, as well as some of the recipes of our buffers and reagents. The company is vertically integrated, so we're doing everything from all of our hardware, software, and biology R&D in-house here in our headquarters in Philadelphia, as well as our hardware and consumables manufacturing. We're doing hardware assembly of our thermal cyclers, assembly of our sample prep kits, lyophilization of our assays here in downtown Philadelphia. And then we also have diagnostic testing services with our wholly owned CLIA high complexity lab subsidiary called One Health Laboratories, which is located in the 4 states I just mentioned. We also have about $80 million in enterprise deals that are covering the next 5 years. And then we've launched over 100 different tests, with the most recent being our SARS-CoV-2 RT-PCR test that has received FDA and Health Canada emergency use authorization. So the future post-COVID, we are really focused on distributed gold standard molecular testing using large targets, so 20 plus PCR target quantitative panels. And we're focused in human health around host response. So this is using the human host immune system's response to an infection. And specifically, we're initially focused on acute respiratory infections. And within acute respiratory infections, our first panel is a bacterial viral differentiation panel that will be used to inform antibiotic prescribing. So I will stop there for now and start with your questions.
Okay, Wayne, would you like to go first?
Yeah, well, holy Toledo. This is quite a business. Most of the questions I live with in my head with our companies all the time don't apply here. So maybe tell me, what does a typical transaction look like? You talked about 80 million in enterprise deals. I mean, what does that look like? Where's all this, sort of what's a transaction look like on a $23 million revenue company like yours?
Sure. So a couple of different use cases. So right now, transactions are primarily around COVID service providing, and we're focused on primarily the entertainment industry. So we're servicing large production houses, Sony, Netflix, Amazon, etc., providing their on-site COVID testing services. We also provide our products to high throughput labs. We have high throughput form factors of our assays, and then we have a medium throughput form factor which utilizes our handheld technology, and they are using those platforms for overflow testing, stat testing, and setting up temporary test sites. So if you've seen the drive-through sample collection locations, turn that into a lab. We're bringing the lab to the sample. So not only are you doing an NP swab collection, you're running real-time PCR right there in the pop-up tent. Going forward, the future, the business model really shifts long-term to host response. And that's primarily more of a typical razor blade model where we're providing hardware systems that are CLIA waived and our panels that are used during the prescribing process prior to prescribing. The first one being this host response for bacterial viral differentiation, but we also have a pretty robust pipeline of signatures to predict risk of septic shock, cardiac markers, et cetera. And then we also have just larger typical infectious disease diagnostics panels for the usual suspects: urinary tract infection, sexually transmitted infections, respiratory panels that we've developed in the past and that we can initially bring to market as LDTs.
Well, I echo Wayne's holy moly. Very impressive company and work. I guess my question was also around sort of how I definitely have a question about like, so who do you see yourselves in 10 years from now? Like, are you like Roche Diagnostics? Are you like 23andMe? I'm trying to get a sense of like what your vision is for the future. And are you a publicly traded company? Are you planning to IPO? So can you give us a sense of where you're heading?
We try to stay flexible. So I'm not going to really paint a specific vision 10 years from now. I had a pretty specific vision back in, this time last year. And I think we're about remaining agile and flexible, including our platform. So this past January, we were 35 people in half of a floor in a Jefferson building at 10th and Chestnut. We're now, close to 250 people in 4 different states 10 months later. So I try to stay flexible, but I do see us being a key enabling technology within a larger personalized medicine and precision medicine vision. And I see the future of this as being able to the trends are telemedicine, et cetera, but people still need a diagnostic to get that regular data on the various biomarkers and that's going on in their systems. And we see the need for a CLIA waivable mobile point of need, point of care system that is sample to answer, but can also handle many more targets. So we're talking 27, our current system does 27 targets. We have designs to go up to 56 very, very quickly with the same form factor, and then beyond that. And you need that quantity of targets in a quantitative real-time PCR system to be able to ping the immune system and understand what's going on from a host response perspective, as well as moving into other types of gene markers.
Great.
So, interesting, there's a danger here, right? Clearly, your pace picked up in COVID, and come heck or high water, we're going to get past COVID. And we've got clients in our portfolio now that have done well now because they've had the right product at the right time. So there's probably a question in here somewhere, right? I assume strategically you're thinking about, how do you generate revenue from this thing and maintain this kind of level? Do you provide the service as a company, or so a lot of those 220 people, are they actually providing the service, or are you completely selling hardware and platform capabilities?
So half of that, half of those 250 people are service providers. So they're part of our One Health Laboratories subsidiary, providing CLIA high complexity testing services. The other half is Biomeme proper, running our R&D and manufacturing. And we treat One Health Laboratories as one of our customers. So they're one of many customers. And so if you can think of One Health Labs as teaching teaching one to fish and demonstrating how to fish. But there are lots of other fishermen out there that also want to be using our technologies as well.
All the time. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but if you could wrap up, Max, that'd be great.
Sure. I just real quick partnerships that we've had over the last couple of years, and then specifically through COVID. We have very close partnerships with the Department of Defense, Northwell Health. I mentioned the entertainment industry. Internationally, we have lots of partnerships. Our partners on the precision medicine and host response side are Predigen, a spin out of Duke University, and we've been closely collaborating with them. Revenues for 2020 are looking like 30 million. Through June of 2021, those 6 months are looking like 70 million, with an EBITDA of 25 million for that time frame. And that will give us quite a good head start to roll into a Series A. And then the plan is to initially roll out our host response test as an LDT in 2021, go through FDA in 2022. We have a clinical utility study funded by the ARLG, and we'll be rolling out also testing with the DoD, and then a commercial rollout with CPT code in 2024. Thank you, Stephanie.
Sure. Thank you, Max. Next up, we have TrialSpark. TrialSpark is a technology company that runs end-to-end clinical trials as an alternative to a traditional CRO. TrialSpark partners with local physicians to enable broader participation in clinical trials. It is powered by a standardized technology platform for data collection, management, and analysis. Joe Zaccaria, Growth Director, will present. Over to you, Joe.
That's great. Thanks, Stephanie. Tough act to follow. Well, I'm Joe Zaccaria. I manage our commercial business here at TrialSpark. I jumped on the rocket ship about 2 years ago after 10 years in life science and strategy consulting. Spent the bulk of that time advising private equity groups on mergers and acquisitions in the outsourced pharma space. So CDMO, data analytics, and a ton of work in preclinical and clinical CRO. And just got furious that we weren't actually making the difference that we needed to bring drugs to market faster, and thought that there had to be a better way to do this. So about 2 years ago, I got put in touch with Ben and the founders at TrialSpark, and it's really been off to the races. So our mission at TrialSpark is to bring new treatments to patients faster and more efficiently. Should come as no surprise, the biggest bottleneck in pharma today is the clinical trial itself, where the speed and costs associated with drug discovery, the identification of new molecules, only continues to increase, but drug development itself only continues to increase. And so when we think about cost and time as those primary levers, each big pharma company spends about $7 billion a year on clinical work itself, and the clinical trial itself might take between 10 and 11 years to get through all of clin dev against that ticking time bomb that is the patent life. And so if we can really move the needle on both the cost and time of the clinical trial, it creates a much more favorable return on investment for pharma companies and TrialSpark and the like. So why are clinical trials so expensive today? We actually are launching a white paper on this currently, but it really boils down to the fact that sponsors will typically outsource the trial to a CRO, but the CRO doesn't run the study, right? The sites actually run the studies. They're the ones seeing the patient. They're the ones with the investigators. And each site really operates as its own small business for data collection, for scheduling, for patient recruitment. And so there's a ton of inherent variability at the site level and across all the sites in the program. This leads to tons of delays and unpredictability amongst the study, leads to overages in cost and time. Secondly, when you're trying to stand up a program, I'll pick on Alzheimer's for right now, all of the Alzheimer's sites in the US are currently running existing competing programs. There's a finite number of sites that have good clinical practice or GCP capabilities that are comfortable with documentation, with standing up programs. And meanwhile, there are thousands of qualified physicians that don't participate in research that really just focus on delivering clinical care. And this is why clinical trials fail to reach about 98 or 99% of eligible patients, because they're not under the care of the investigators at clinical trial sites. They're being treated by clinical physicians that are really focused on delivering high quality medicine. So with these two real challenges in mind, TrialSpark set out to build a business that's pretty simple. We want to understand where your patients are, find the doctors that treat those patients, and create net new infrastructure around those physicians to run a highly efficient trial. And this really starts with technology. As I mentioned, we are a tech company at our core. And so we started out building out the tech systems itself associated with the trial. And so you can think of the front end being patient recruitment, e-consent, the screening processes, and then the middleware being all the direct data capture. So eSource, eCRF, EDC, the database associated with collecting trial data, and the back end, all things around ePro, scheduling, payments, CTMS, dashboarding, reporting. And so with all that consistent data layer standardized across individual physicians as well as trial sites, you're able to run a much more efficient and lower cost clinical program. So let's pick on exactly how those efficiencies are created. It starts out in the startup and recruitment frames. So with a traditional clinical trial, startup periods involve contracting with dozens of clinical trial sites, developing clinical trial technologies, potentially outsourcing to a new vendor. And then once you're recruiting these patients in, you're competing against other programs at those trial sites in that very finite areas. At TrialSpark, we take a very different approach. So our focus on contracting and technology build and being able to do all this in parallel cuts down the time it takes to stand up a study to 2 to 3 months against what we've typically seen in 8 to 11 for a regular clinical program. So then once our studies are up and running, we've seen recruitment and enrollment rates at 1.5 to 2x faster through a combination of high-powered digital advertising as well as this engagement with local community doctors. And when we partner with these local community doctors, being a tech company, we do create electronic medical record bridges into their practices to help facilitate enrollment, to help these doctors identify which patients could be eligible for your clinical trial. So when we think about the back end efficiencies, this is where the tech really comes into play. So clinical trial monitoring is the primary driver of costs. And again, in a pre-COVID world, we had CRAs flying around the country to spend half days at clinical trial sites just reviewing source data verification, making sure what the PI wrote down in a notebook matches the data that was uploaded into an EDC. And frankly, in 2020, we don't need to have that degree of source data verification. Why not just enter the data one time into an iPad or a tablet that will serve as direct data capture, and then you don't need to validate that source. So having this standardized tech platform really facilitates a lot of these monitoring cost efficiencies. And really, when you think about the clinical trial technology ecosystem today, absolutely. So we make money 3 different ways. We partner with pharma companies on an enterprise basis. We buy our own drugs and pieces of drugs and spinning out NUCOs. And then we could serve as an alternative to a CRO running trials for a mix of cash and equity. So,
and now,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Over to the judges. Wayne or Rena, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, thank you, Joe. I think this is a really exciting area, and there's so many different opportunities, as you demonstrated in your last few minutes or a few seconds. I was just going to ask you, I always hear from patients how difficult it is, having just been newly diagnosed, to find a clinical trial. So do you guys view yourselves as like a marketplace to connect patients with trials, or are you really mostly focused on providing a service to pharma?
Yeah, it's a good question, Rena. I think our primary focus is on individual clinical studies. And so there are plenty of clinical trial aggregators and patient matching type companies like the Patients Like Me's of the world that do a pretty good job of supporting patients in identifying studies. I think we work with those aggregators when we are contracted with a pharma sponsor against a specific indication or a specific therapeutic area.
Thank you.
Sure.
So this is a lot more than, I took a little look before the presentations here today. And, my question at that point was, boy, these patient recruitment agencies, they're kind of a dime a dozen. There's a lot of them out there. They all have claims about how great they are. Where are you? Because you've raised a lot of capital, so I don't know where you are in terms of revenue, but where are you in terms of size vis-a-vis your competitors in the marketplace? Are you 10% of the market, 2%? What's the deal there?
Yeah, funny you mentioned the patient recruitment side, Wayne. So we did get our start as a digital recruitment vendor, servicing sites, helping to increase traffic to those trial sites, but found that of every 4 leads that we were able to pass off to the site, only 1 got scheduled. And that really led us to understand the shortage of trial sites, shortage of investigators. And then our business model evolved to servicing pharma with some sites as part of a clinical program. And when our sites were over recruiting, we were like, you know what, we need to just go for the brass ring and build out a full new trial engine to run things faster and more efficiently. So while there's a variety of different types of competitors, either on the technology side or on the decentralized clinical trial side or on the recruitment side, we really want to bring together the best of all of those worlds in a single package.
And so that's where your competitive advantage is, because it's a bundle of services instead of just one piece of it. Yeah, interesting.
That's right.
And which part of that bundle, or maybe it's not yet part of the bundle, do you think is most difficult or most challenging to transition sort of from the current to the digital?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we were building out our ecosystem and building out our core technology layer, we were pushing for remote monitoring and pushing for remote visits and flexible data entry ahead of COVID-19. And then most of our studies come March involved in-person clinic visits, and many of our sites were in New York City, Chicago, and DC. And so all of those sites shut down. And fortunately, we had the infrastructure built to transition all those in-person visits to telehealth visits. Because we have Zoom that's integrated with our platform in a HIPAA-compliant manner. We're able to recruit patients remotely, monitor data remotely. And so while our sponsors were really dragging their feet and not ready to jump into the pool and incorporate many of these advanced technologies, we were pretty well positioned to capitalize on this trend.
And what's your exit strategy?
We want to go all the way. I think it would be easy or easier, I should say, to get gobbled up by an IQVIA or a Parexel or the large CROs. We fundamentally believe that the CRO business model as it exists today is flawed. The bill per hour basis, there's no incentive for efficiency. And so if we really want to make a difference in bringing new medications to treatments faster and eventually bringing the cost down associated with those medicines, we need to remain independent. So our outlook is to go public at some point in the future.
Good for you. What is your revenue level today?
Mm-hmm. So we've raised a Series B about 2 years ago from Thrive and Sequoia. They're our two primary investors, and then other personal investors include John Doerr and Mike Moritz from Sequoia.
Can you say SPAC?
I've heard of SPACs. I'll leave it at that way.
Has COVID dramatically changed how you see yourselves?
COVID's had a bunch of different impacts on our business. I think it operationally strained us, where we were scrambling to keep patients in trials. We were scrambling to figure out direct-to-patient IP delivery. And then commercially, we're actually able to recognize that running remote trials, even though we weren't doing it that frequently, was a core capability of ours. And so we were able to actually stand up a Covalence Research Network with Sam Altman, a tech entrepreneur from Y Combinator, as well as Dr. Mark Fishman, to run end-to-end COVID studies using our technology and our platform. So we ran one study with the Harvard School of Public Health, running another study with Restore biotech out of here in Boston. So we never, like most organizations, did not set out to be a COVID company, but recognize the use case, and being an agile tech company, we're able to kind of lean into it and be able to try and make a difference and join all these other companies in the fight against COVID.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have for this session. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Gregor Diagnostics. Gregor Diagnostics is a Madison, Wisconsin-based molecular diagnostics company focused on developing a new screening test for prostate cancer. Prostate cancer screening has been a hotly debated topic over the last 2 decades because of the overdiagnosis and overtreatment caused by current screening methods. Gregor is developing a better solution that can limit these issues while still saving men from this deadly disease. Gregor was founded in 2016 by Tobias Zutz, who previously was a member of the team at Exact Sciences that developed Cologuard, a non-invasive screening test for colon cancer. So presenting for Gregor Diagnostics is Toby Zutz, the CEO. Over to you, Toby.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm Toby Zutz. I'm the CEO founder of Gregor Diagnostics, and at Gregor, we're developing a new gold standard for prostate cancer screening. There we go. Prostate cancer, like many other cancers, is very treatable when detected early. Unfortunately, if your prostate cancer is not detected until it's already metastasized, the 5-year survival rates plummet to 31%. And how do we make sure we detect these prostate cancers early? Well, we do screening. A great screening test really has 4 things. The first is that it's very accurate, right? So very highly sensitive and highly specific at the same time. The second is that it's actionable, so it informs the treatment decisions that a physician can make. The third is that it's accessible, so patients have access to the test. They don't have to take 2 days off work, and the testing is non-invasive. And the fourth is that it's affordable. So by using a screening test up front, you save money to the system on a whole by eliminating unnecessary follow-up diagnostics and treatments. I mentioned the Cologuard story here because it's pretty relevant. Cologuard, as Stephanie mentioned, is an at-home stool-based colon cancer screening test. It was launched by Exact Sciences in 2014. Was the only product that Exact had on the market until they purchased Genomic Health last year for just under $3 billion. So on the success of a single cancer screening test, they're able to be a $10 billion plus company. I joined the company Exact in 2009 when we were 13 people, and left in 2015 when we were about 650, about 9 months after we launched Cologuard. But I'm focused on prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is the #1 diagnosed cancer for men in the United States and the second most deadly. This year projecting to kill about 33,000 men in the US, a number that's increased each of the last 4 years at a faster rate than any other cancer in the US. The problem is the current screening test, PSA, been around since the early 90s, but has a whole host of problems. If you compare kind of the low value that PSA gives you to these other high value tests for colorectal cancer screening, breast cancer screening, or cervical cancer screening, it just doesn't live up to the hype, essentially being no better than a coin flip. Because of this, it leads to a whole host of downstream problems associated with that screening. But we can develop a better test. And we're going to do that by kind of replaying the Cologuard playbook, by using seminal fluid to detect prostate cancer. The function of the prostate is to produce seminal fluid, and about 30% of semen is actually made directly by the prostate, giving us a much higher concentration of the biomarkers we're detecting and allowing us to develop a much more accurate test, both for sensitivity and specificity of cancer detection, but also the differentiation between low risk and high risk cancers. How would this work? It would be a physician ordered test. We'd ship a kit to the patient's home, provide the sample at home, and ship it back to our lab. We'd run the test, give the results back to the doctor, either indicating no cancer for a longer 3-year interval for screening, likely indolent cancer, refer them out to urology, and put them on an active surveillance program, monitoring every 6 months, or potentially aggressive cancer. So again, refer them out to urology, but enter in the biopsy and diagnosing and treating that cancer. By using this biological advantage of the seminal fluid, we're able to generate this more accurate result, limiting the number of unnecessary biopsies and unnecessary treatments, but still saving men's lives. A better test here grows this market. There are 36 million men in the US, age 50 to 70. If we use a test only once every 3 years and price it at $500, that's a $6 billion opportunity. Again, also use this test for active surveillance and eventually move outside the United States as well. We presented our first set of data last week at the Society of Urologic Oncology, demonstrating that we were able to achieve a sensitivity of 79% with specificity at 88%, a bit under the 90-90 threshold we want to get to. But as this was our first feasibility study demonstrating this approach of using seminal fluid, we're really happy with those results. There's a number of things we can do pretty quickly to increase those numbers. Oh, all right. The team right now is really small, 6 people. Tanya and I both spent time developing Cologuard at Exact. We have a clinical team that has experience running clinical trials and 2 young scientists, and Cece and Joel, to help with the assay development and early experiments. Our advisory board has a nice mix of academics with Dr. Dave Gerard and Han Leong, physicians with Dave again and Mike Filoni, and industry scientists with Bob Wolford and Jason Christensen, who've been executives at diagnostic companies for a long time. Our current investors, we went through the Health Wildcatters program in 2017 and have raised money from First Round Capital, Green Park and Gulf Ventures, and the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, all of whom have supported us multiple times. To wrap things up, poor screening makes prostate cancer harder to detect and treat, and we have a solution that can fix that. So happy to answer your questions.
Okay, would you like to go first, Wayne?
Sure. Great presentation. I was going to ask how did you get the name, but we won't bother with that.
It's Gregor Mendel, but okay.
Yeah, I figured that was the deal. So talk a little bit more about where you are in the science. You said you presented your first data. I mean, this is going to take, as most diagnostics do, I think, a tremendous amount of education of the medical community, white papers, conferences, et cetera. You missed your 90/90 target. What do you think is your timing to be able to have maybe a paper published or really be able to do some marketing?
Yeah, we have a long road to actually commercialization as well. So there's a lot of time to educate as we continue to build the test. Our next study we're looking to have done in Q1, towards the end of Q1, maybe into Q2, demonstrated an improvement that we made on this first study. That we raised about $2 million and are running a clinical study where we've collected samples from 350 men at about 20 sites around the U.S. And so that, with kind of the early feasibility, hired Tanya really to build some of the assays that we took off-the-shelf kits that weren't optimized for our approach, and so kind of rebuilding those types of things. Again, it was the first time we had collected samples. We encountered an issue with sample processing that we didn't expect, but over the summer we have fixed that issue and actually developed a stability approach where we can stabilize these biomarkers for 7 days up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So someone down in Arizona or Florida in the summer, Texas, can provide that sample and still ship it back to the central CLIA lab for running. So that was really a very early stage, test. We've continued to improve the assays and the sample treatments that can get us over those humps that we need to.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was going to ask, you talked about sort of the current standard of care, but you didn't speak that much to the pipeline of competitors. And I've read a little bit about some of the liquid biopsy companies. I know there's a urine company that just got breakthrough status recently from the FDA. Can you talk a little bit about how you're positioned relative to pipeline competitors?
Yeah. So I mean, the big liquid biopsy companies, the blood companies, Grail, Thrive,
sure,
whomever, have not had really great prostate cancer data. The Grail particularly couldn't detect stage 1 and stage 2 cancers. Ours were only stage 1 and stage 2 and skewed heavily in the low risk population. I know the urine cancer company you're talking about. Honestly, their data is very impressive. I don't know about some of the approaches they're going to take, and I don't know how the sample processing, if you have to come to a lab, it seems like they froze everything very quickly, which is what we did, and how they anticipate approaching that. If you have to do, send out the central CLIA lab that we're approaching, or if they're doing that or doing a more distributed model to sell to hospitals in their local labs, I'm not sure. But yeah, so I think this is a huge enough market that there are multiple winners as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I mean, it sounds like, given the distribution nature of the testing, you refer to it as early prostate screening. As you go to market, are you proposing that docs prescribe this at an earlier age than typically the PSA test is 50, right? Get to 50 and it's time to go get the screening. And if so, what are the indications that would prompt a doc to suggest that at a younger age that they get this test?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we are earlier in terms of age of the patients, or just early in the development of the cancer. So 50 is probably a good start for most of the population, 45 for African Americans, potentially people with family history. But generally, it is a later disease. That 50 to 70 is kind of the sweet spot where you really want to start screening. Depending upon, if you have a more accurate test, you can screen earlier and later.
But so when you're saying early,
early in cancer development, not early in age. So before it has, while it's still localized to the prostate.
Okay, got it.
But do you see this becoming a direct-to-consumer product?
I think there's a direct consumer component for sure, particularly in the marketing and awareness. What they saw with Cologuard was that those commercials of the box jumping around were very effective at driving patients to request the test from their physicians. And so that has to be a component of the marketing strategy. I still think a physician involvement is incredibly important though, because anytime you're dealing with cancer and oncology, if you have that positive result, you need that to come from their doctor to follow up with what the next steps are. So there's a component to it, but I don't think it can ultimately stand on its own as a direct-to-consumer product.
I mean, you could certainly have some fun with the marketing for this product.
Somebody could. Me personally, I may not be that person, but we'll hire that right person to do it when we get there for sure.
How much money are you looking to raise?
Yeah, so we are going to be going out soon to kind of do our next raise of money, ultimately to kind of get the whole product developed through a large clinical study. It's probably in that 50 to 80, $90 million range. Definitely not what we're looking for in the next round, but just to know, realize ultimately to get through all the clinical study development and commercials, to launch is where it need to be. Because it's screening, we do have to do a big study. We do have to go to FDA and ideally with CMS parallel review as well.
Yeah, that'll be in that age group. That'll be a major payer.
Should be right in their wheelhouse for what they want to be looking at. So.
Great, thank you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Toby. Next up, we have, and last but not least, we have EpiVario. Sorry. Can you see? Can you hear? Can you see EpiVario?
Yes.
Okay, great. EpiVario is an early-stage drug discovery and development company that targets a wide range of memory-related psychiatric disorders, including PTSD, Alzheimer's, and alcohol and drug addiction. The company's novel approach targets memory formation at the source of the disease, preventing the creation and the reconsolidation of traumatic memories. Core to EpiVario is administering its drug in conjunction with psychotherapy, where a negative or traumatic memory is intentionally relived with the goal of disassociating the stress linked to the original traumatic event. EpiVario is a startup company originally founded at the Penn Center for Innovation. Thomas Kim, the president and CEO, will present. Over to you, Thomas.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'll go about sharing my screen. So EpiVario, we're a spin out of University of Pennsylvania. Again, we're developing this breakthrough discovery using epigenetic gene regulation that impacts memory formation. We're developing small molecule inhibitors. We published on this proof of concept based on this novel target, ACSS2, in Nature back in 2017 and most recently in 2019. This past year, we were a finalist in the Nature Spinoff Prize as one of the finalists out of 150 companies. We were co-founded by Shelley Berger at University of Penn and Philip Muse, who's a teaching faculty at Mount Sinai. We've been blessed with a renowned scientific advisory board, including Eric Nestler and John Crystal at Yale. PTSD, many of you associate this with the military, but more so of late. It's a rampant problem with lay folks, civilians, and up to 8% of people will be afflicted with this disorder in their lifetime. And you can see the tremendous numbers, nearly 30 million in the US alone. The scary thing is the standard of care is psychotherapy, and it's not very effective. Many folks relapse, and there really is no pharmacotherapy in the pipeline. And our discovery is a metabolic enzyme in the nucleus of neuronal cells, and it provides fuel, acetyl-CoA, to histone acetylase, histone acetyltransferase, which upregulates memory genes that are needed for synaptic plasticity. And in a pivotal study, we looked at trauma effects in rats, and they're exposed to a predator here through cat urine, and the control and our drug cohort, and you look at their response to cues after they've been primed for this fear response. And you can see in this graph, the cohort that was on our drug shows significantly reduced freezing. So that's a measure of fear as they are apprehensive about, here in this case, a predator. And the way this would work in a clinical setting is the current standard of care is psychotherapy, a lot of cognitive therapy. And during these guided recalls where they bring up the traumatic event, the patient would be on our drug, and this would reduce the memory reconsolidation and disassociate the stress from the traumatic memory. And thereby you can subsequently follow with the psychotherapy regimen. Switching over to substance abuse, it's a significant burden on society, as you can see from these numbers. In a addiction model, you can see here we study its conditioned place preference. The rodents are conditioned either in an alcohol or a saline side of the cage, and then thereafter they're given a choice test. And typically the animals will favor the alcohol side. And here in the study, you can see by eliminating the enzyme, our target enzyme, you can see wild type, there's an enhanced preference for the alcohol side, and that does not exist for our ACSS2 knockdown. We're developing therapeutics for PTSD and addiction, as you can see. We've in-licensed 2 patent families from the University of Pennsylvania. And we're blessed with some renowned business advisors, including Chris Cashman and Joan Lau. We've raised in seed funding a little bit over 700,000. We've performed some DMPK work at Charles River. We've completed a sponsor research agreement with the University of Pennsylvania, and we've done some additional preclinical studies, engaged some collaborators in the academic space to run the gold standard addiction model, which is self-administration. We're looking to raise $15 million by the middle of next year to complete drug product development and pre-IND conference and IND filing. And that's it.
Great. Excuse me, Rena, could you start?
Sure. Thank you, Thomas. This is a very exciting area. Can you just describe a little bit, sort of, I guess, the behavioral theory of the case for PTSD? So the idea is that the memories we're conditioned to have certain feelings that accompany memories. And so if we bring back that memory with the pill and we uncondition ourselves during that memory, then the PTSD should dissipate faster. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, yes. Typically what happens, you associate fear, stress with the traumatic memory of the traumatic event. And through repeated cycles of, and I kind of relate that to anxiety. I mean, all of us have some form of anxiety. Usually we can control it with our cognitive processing. But here, through cycles of recall of the traumatic event and undergoing the associated fear and stress, it continues to build. And that memory process is called reconsolidation. So you can think of it as you constantly go through that cycle, it exacerbates the associated stress and fear that you have with that traumatic event. And that's when it becomes debilitating and prevents you from functioning in society, relationships, attention span and all that.
But when you bring back by bringing back the memory, you're also bringing back those fears and anxieties.
Yes.
To address, okay, got it.
Yeah. And then the goal is then not to recapture all that the next go around and the next go around.
Okay.
I mean, so this is a revolutionary approach almost to treating PTSD. It feels, which is fantastic.
Yeah, because right now, the only approved drugs for PTSD are SSRIs, so antidepressants. So really what you're doing is you're just trying to mask some of the emotion, the symptoms that come along with PTSD.
Yep. And so I think, but because of that, it's going to be you're at the very beginning of a very long journey. One of our clients has worked in this space significantly in PTSD, intermittent explosive disorder, and a variety of other conditions, and are developing drugs against it. And they've been at it for quite a while. They've had a lot of success raising money from the Department of Defense, from SBIR, to the tune of $15-18 million. Trying to raise 15 million in the next 6 months is going to be really a challenge.
Sure.
At the stage that you're at. And so I guess I'm asking the question. I'm supposed to ask questions.
Yeah.
Are you pursuing governmental, non-dilutive capital sources for some of this work you need to do?
Sure. Yeah. No, we've engaged with NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, and we'll be resubmitting an application this January window. We believe PTSD is probably a prime opportunity to partner with the government. We will look at DoD opportunities as well. I think the addiction side, because the collaborators that we're working with on these animal models, because they are the gold standard and they're validated and very correlative to human behavior. I think success in those models will allow us to gain a lot of traction with the VC community for an addiction therapeutic. Not exactly like PTSD, but we know on the addiction side, there's very limited types of pharmacotherapy, and they usually just attack the same transmitters and with less drug abuse liability. But you're still playing to the same response in the patient. So we're doing it in a different manner, and hopefully eliminating all the drug abuse liability issues.
I know this is thinking far ahead from where you are, but how challenging will it be to demonstrate efficacy in clinical trials? Are you going to be comparing patients with psychotherapy to patients with psychotherapy plus drug, and what kinds of outcomes are you going to be looking for?
Yeah, so there's a lot of clinician observed responses. And I think real world observations, real world outcomes are beginning to be greater accepted. Definitely in the psychiatry community. Right now, psychotics have gained more popularity and acceptance in the neuropsych space. And there is a phase 3 study that's ongoing, studying augmented psychotherapy with MDMA, ecstasy, and that's in a phase 3 trial right now for PTSD.
Another one of our clients has a diagnostics company, and one of the things that they've developed some point of care diagnostics for is various psychotic issues. So they've got a diagnostic kit against clozapine, for instance, because apparently now patient comes in to see the therapist. The therapist doesn't know whether the patient's been taking the drug that they're supposed to be taking in the doses, but in the office within 10 minutes they can get the result and know a little bit better about who they're dealing with.
Sure.
So any thoughts about developing companion diagnostic with your drug as you proceed?
Yeah, we're working with some collaborators on looking at EEG monitoring, using that as a potential biomarker in terms of brain activity. Obviously, downstream of our targeted activity is going to be a lot of synaptic plasticity that's going on. So the goal would be, if we can, everybody's using big data, if we can generate enough data and show this is sort of a correlate to what we're trying to do on the synaptic level, then I think that would be huge for us.
You might have talked about this, but in terms of, so right now you have identified a place in the hippocampus that you're trying to target. Is that,
Yeah.
do you actually have any, like, where are you in terms of finding an actual drug or molecule, or how do you shut that off? What's the IP situation?
Yeah. So we have a small molecule compound that we've delivered IP to the animals, and we're working with some consultants and CROs in terms of taking that and converting it to and identifying the pharmacokinetics for bioavailability into a oral formulation. So that we're working on that now.
Great. Okay.
That's all the time we have for this for that presentation. Thank you so much, Thomas. And now just bear with us while Walter will distribute the poll for the audience to select their favorite startup for this track. Okay, and the audience's pick for favorite startup for this track is Solution Medical. Julia, would you like to say a few words?
Wow, this is very exciting. Thank you very much. I started this company because I wanted to turn a personal, what most people would maybe consider a detriment and that of my brother as well, into an opportunity. And I'm excited that you guys recognize that in our pitch and in our story. And I hope that Solution will not only be successful with our device, but if nothing more, and there will be more, but if nothing more, everybody learned today about what adrenal insufficiency is. And every single day we're teaching people about a very rare condition that most people have never even heard about. So I hope you learned something, and thank you for your vote.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our companies that participated. Thank you to our presenters, John, Julia, Max, Joe, Toby, and Thomas. And thank you especially to our judges, Wayne Barz and Rena Rosenberg. And thank you so much to our audience for taking the time to listen to this session. And give you a preview for our next event coming up for 2021 is MedCity Invest. It's from April 19th to the 23rd. Again, it will be virtual, but hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be doing this. We'll be meeting each other face to face. I'd like to thank all the speakers and attendees for taking part in our conversation about precision medicine. I'd like to thank our awesome events team of Laura Kittredge and our producer, Walter Lim. And I'd also like to thank our CEO, John Lerner, and our editor-in-chief, Arundhati Parmar, for giving me the opportunity to put this conference together. If you'd like to hang out and network, we would welcome you to do so. Thank you again, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other face to face in the not too distant future. Have a great weekend and a great holiday season, and stay safe. Thank you.